The hall was ginormous and garish, even by Orokin standards. The ceiling ready to tumble apart with the sheer volume of chandeliers and banners it caught. It would only take half of one to fall and fully crush a man. There the Golden Lord sat, at the foot of a table that he wagered could have sat an entire Dax battalion side by side. Directly across the gulf from himself was the torrid, bulging mass that was Executor Karish. A simple meeting was what Karish had called for him in letter. Executor Ballas had accepted, knowing full well that for Karish, any opportunity for seating was an excuse to consume. Ever keen to broker himself as a being of culture and fine taste, the two had been accompanied in the long haul by a pianist, no doubt commissioned by Karish himself to bring some relaxed class to the occasion. In another circumstance, Ballas would have appreciated such ambience, but not here. Utterly dwarfed by his master, the paltry notes the boy produced made nothing to mask the guttural roars of delight and voracious chewing that shocked the chamber every second, denying the symphony any presence. And so here he was, estranged, smiling through his polished face at the mountain of flesh before him, the host of this feast. His sharp, golden gaze muted the distance between them and pierced straight into the eyes of the monster, which were dulled and blind in a way only made possible through decades of continuous intake. Every inch of the banquet table seemed to warp and stutter under the weight of offering. Plates stacked on plates, stacked further with gilded ornaments, entire fountains of wine bursting forth from the surface like rents in an artery, swathes of Orokin gold working together desperately to bring a sense of glory for this bloated sea of delicacy it smothered beneath. To an ordinary mind, a sight such as this would be astonishing in its sheer scale and concentration, evoking both horror and excitement in equal measure. But not so Ballas, who, as another of the Golden Lords alongside Karish, had long since lost all sense of reaction to such displays of carnal excess centuries ago. The fact also existed that Ballas himself was hardly a stranger to sin. He took the first tentative sip of his wine and pondered at the scenario of dividing the table in half, with each executor made to pile on their every depravity for each side. Was such an event able to occur, Ballas was certain that their collective luggage would be more than sufficient to crush the table and the room before making the entire building collapse in on itself through to the firmament below. He smiled into his chalice. The first crack would undoubtedly be owed to him, however. Ballas finished his sip around the same time Karish paused their munching and rejoined him in reality. His heart sank as to whatever was about to come. Brah! Exhaling for Karish was no different from belching. A fantastic appetizer, he praised, gesturing at the Elder Norg carcass below him. As attendants rushed to clear his station, Karish peered at Ballas's own. Oh dear, Ballas, you've barely touched your dish at all. Has it suffered somehow? In truth, Ballas had eaten his share already, but with the dish so gargantuan in nature, it easily obscured that fact from view. It is a beautiful creature, Executor, Ballas laced in his usual velvet tones. It is only through fault of my own that I reject it, however. Norg has never been a fascination of mine. Karish laughed with a sound like blending meat, a loudspeaker carrying it across the room to Ballas's proximity. No matter, there is always more. How is the wine? I distinctly remember you being partial to the Venusian Reds. As you can see, I have a great many in selection.
I am pleased with my current arrangement, Ballas calmed. Allow me to nurture it a while.
Very well, came Karish's raucous reply. But I shall remind you once more, Executor, that at this table, should you desire it, what is mine is yours.
Ballas nodded to placate the beast, watching Karish seek their napkins while their orbiting stomachs churned their new contents. He promptly resigned back again to his mind, the continuing silence leading him to the welcome belief that the conversation had ended. But Karish moved quickly to speak again after lapping the last of the oil from their maw.
I must say, Executor, I called you here today because I wish to congratulate you on your recent shaking off from your oppositions, shall we say.
The beast paused, licking their fingers.
And, he suddenly reignited, 2 brand new Warframes born from the action. Already at work in the wild, I expect, Marvelous work. I'm sure the small pups who were hounding you are now well and truly silenced.
Ballas stared, sneering inside. While it had never been overt, it didn't take much to determine that the most fervent criticisms towards his work as of late had been sourced from those governed by Karish and his associates. The attitude matched perfectly. On the surface, Karish was indeed in support of the war effort, but only because the war itself served as an obstacle to his gluttony. An obese slug like him being desperate to expedite things would be completely true to type. The more war, the less room to cultivate, and therefore to consume. But Karish was really paying attention now, melding the folds of his face together as carefully as he could to form something close to politeness.
Your actions and continued dedication to the war effort have inspired me, Executor, and so thusly I have decided to bring my own contribution to the Warframe project.
This surprised Ballas, and then quickly ignited glee deep within the recesses of his soul. This was the real reason they were meeting. As Karish had been discreet in his criticism, Ballas had likewise been discreet in his knowledge of it, but had not been without retort. One of the warframes he had designed in reaction to the fiasco had been Grendel, a lumbering ghoul that devoured everything in its path. It didn't take an Archimedean to see that it bore a stark likeness towards one particular executor. Of course, with every feature sculpted to be as grotesque as possible. And now the flaccid lump had come to him directly, with the express desire to quickly submit his own design for construction. Anything to rid himself and his reputation of the current association Ballas had provided him. At last, this tiresome occasion had finally become entertaining. Very well, he would listen to what the slug had to say.
But how generous, dear Karish. I would be honored to assist in bringing your ideas to life. What exactly did you have in mind?
No later than had the question left his lips that a bell tolled, and what Ballas could only assume was the main dish was carted into the hall on repulsor lift, flanked by Karish's kitchen staff. Fully expecting another half hour of munching, Ballas was astonished to see Karish demonstrate restraint. His expression belied its usual manic glow at the titanic plate in front of him, but he kept it at distance. The silence hung in the air, and Ballas could finally hear the chamber pianist clearly. Karish waited until his staff had vacated, then met Ballas's gaze with utter seriousness.
I suppose this is as good a place as any to breach the topic, he began, his tone unusually solemn. This very dish that has been devoted to me at this moment took 24 individuals of the finest skill and temperament to prepare and have it arrive to my station. Innumerable more prior to reaching my palace to gather, preserve, and transport, with countless hours interweaved throughout the entire process.
Ballas was lost. He had thought this manner Karish now took to be merely performative, but here he was, demonstrating awareness. This was completely alien.
As I said, my staff are the finest in the system, and they dedicate their lives and crafts to me every day without respite. They are perfect. The process is perfect. Nothing can be improved when it comes to my dining.
He paused, looking down into some abyss below, before gripping the table and leering forward suddenly.
But it is still not enough,
he roared, the speaker sending tremendous reverberation through the hall. Ballas remained still, enraptured. At that moment, the pianist stopped playing, and the young boy who had been knelt at his stool all this time approached Ballas, lingering only to place a Vitruvian at the edge of the table. Ballas had to force himself not to grin. All that grand speech, the seeming depth of the words, had not been brought out from appreciation, no. They had been brought from lament, pure, unbridled gluttony. I must have more, Ballas, Karish spat. And with your assistance, there can be. I beseech you, executor, take this design, and take my kitchen masters with it. Imprint it onto every single one of them, and you will have my full endorsement. Ballas had opened the Vitruvian, taking in its contents, the white-coated figure spinning in the void, brandishing pristine steel and furnace fire. Once satisfied, he closed the device, grinning truly, and raised his chalice in toast. Karish mirrored his grin, stuffing it with the first bite of his meal.
Bring me the most, Ballas, he choked. Bring me Kaiser.